There are not many stories of informal truces between enemies during times of war, and World War I had the informal Christmas truce of December 24th, 1914 through January 1st, 1915, between German and British forces on the Western Front. Both sides crossed no man's land, met, exchanged gifts, and, according to the story, even played a soccer match against each other. Many of these soldiers even exchanged addresses so that they could meet up again after the war should they survive. Such was the mutual feeling that the war was pointless in their eyes. However, things were quite different on the Eastern Front, which was just as brutal and the conditions even worse for both Germans and Russians. Yet amazingly, during the winter months of January to February of 1917, a similar event occurred, but for a very different reason. What would make German and Russian soldiers join forces and work together after a year of brutal fighting? How do they operate side by side as allies in a mutual fight for survival? What was the mutual enemy that they faced?
Hello, Danny Lee, OGT here with OGL, my partner in crime. This is not a music documentary. A little bit out of breath, OGL. Can you give them the backstory on 2014 Truce? 1914 Truce.
There was like he said, 1914, there was a truce between, I believe it was British and German soldiers, where they laid down their arms, they sang together to each other, they sang together, they played soccer. Was this the Christmas truce?
Yeah, they exchanged gifts, everything.
Yeah, it was a really very beautiful
There's
moment.
pictures of this.
Yeah, there were, after this happened, there were other attempts at it, from what I heard, but when this happened, the top brass was none too happy. So they don't. That's their war. You don't want your soldiers seeing the enemy as human beings.
And a lot of them exchanged addresses. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Yeah. A lot of them exchanged addresses, right? Yeah. Introduced their kids to each other.
Yeah, they weren't soldiers anymore. They were humans, interacting as humans do. So it was really a very beautiful moment.
It goes to show when two countries are at war, that doesn't necessarily mean the people of those countries are at war.
I couldn't put it any better. Yeah, 100%, sir.
Ozzy Osbourne said it first. War pigs.
Well, except, yeah, I could have. Okay,
not first.
I could understand you, but I can understand Ozzy when he sings. So.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if he ever said anything right.
Yeah, but there have been other times in history when soldiers from opposing nations or opposing alliances have put aside their differences to bond for a common good. The Christmas truce was to celebrate Christmas, but what we've got here, and I was not familiar with this one. What we've got here is a video that basically details a time when soldiers put aside their differences to fight a mutual enemy, which was apparently a pack of wolves, which at the time, wolves are very dangerous for anyone traveling through. They're an apex predator. They're pack hunters that can take down prey much larger than themselves. And there's a reason why we have legends of things like werewolves, because wolves at one point in time were legitimately to be feared. So we've since, society has grown. We've pushed them to the outskirts, but if you walk through Yellowstone or something like that, you'll see them. And so this is these guys didn't have any fences between them and the wolves. And wolves are hungry, and they'll eat what's available.
And they have a pack mentality, no different than the soldiers.
Exactly, and their organization and their coordination every bit as impressive. In fact, I'd probably say more so, because much less ego involved with the wolves. So, but yeah, I'm not
way more unity.
100%. Yeah. Because it's not about conflicting ideologies or anything. It's about survival. It's about feeding, about making sure that the young survive. So I'm very interested in seeing this because I'm not familiar with that. I enjoy reading stories, especially about predatory animals and that sort of thing and how they interact with humans. So this is quite fascinating. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the movie The Gray with Liam Neeson. It's got a similar type of story. Yeah.
And I came across this watching a certain podcaster who's popular. They were talking about stories, crazy stories, and he mentioned this. So I fact checked it a little, and in fact checking, I watched a couple of different versions of this, and there is no actual historical document stating this truce happened, but there is chatter on paper and through audio interviews and written accounts of soldiers from both sides who both sides were very, very aware of this problem, and both sides say that there was a truce, but there is no actual account of it. You can research it yourself. It's a wonderful rabbit hole.
And as we've said, it's probably within the best interest of those in charge to make sure that this information doesn't get out. Because like I said, you don't want people thinking that, your soldiers can treat the treat the enemy like they're actual human beings. So it does not surprise me that there's no historical documentation of this.
Right. So I just picked this one because it has a disclaimer at the end.
Right.
There are probably about, I'm gonna go watch the rest myself. So I wanted to react, and OGL hasn't seen it at all. And like I said, I've seen this one time. So,
yeah, this looks fascinating. I can't wait to see it.
Here we go.
There are not many stories of informal truces between enemies during times of war, and World War I had the informal Christmas truce of December 24th, 1914 through January 1st, 1915, between German and British forces on the Western Front. Both sides crossed no man's land, met, exchanged gifts, and, according to the story, even played a soccer match against each other. Many of these soldiers even exchanged addresses, so that they could meet up again after the war should they survive. Such was the mutual feeling that the war was pointless in their eyes. However, things were quite different on the Eastern Front, which was just as brutal and the conditions even worse for both Germans and Russians. Yet amazingly, during the winter months of January to February of 1917, a similar event occurred, but for a very different reason. What would make German and Russian soldiers join forces and work together after a year of brutal fighting? How do they operate side by side as allies in a mutual fight for survival? What was the mutual enemy that they faced? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former soldier, Marine Corps Scout Sniper, history professor, historian and book author, and we will answer these questions and other issues on this segment of Forgotten History.
Okay, I think I'm going to cut it right there, and I'm going to start with that, and then lead into this, us talking. So I'll probably leave this in there, as I always do, guys. It just seems like that would be a better way to start into our conversation, and now we will watch the story, the rest of the story, which is not Walter Cronkite, who that's my mom, Omar, not my dad. My father's name was Walter, and I always thought Walter Cronkite said that. Let me know in the comments who said that. The rest of the story. Anzac Day had a lot to do with World War I, correct, OGL? So this means a lot in so many different ways,
Mm-hmm.
It mentions Australia. Ironically enough, it doesn't mention the U.S. government at all. But,
right.
All right, let's get into it. The band Epica sings songs in a stairwell, and that's his band, and I love the songs. It just gives it a wonderful echo, and he's in a stairwell out of town.
It's a nice hotel, nice ambiance here. So, yeah.
He's doing good deeds. So, all right, let's do the thing.
Near the end of 1916, in the area of Lithuania and Belarus in the Kovno-Vilna-Minsk district, near modern Vilnius, Lithuania, starving wolves had been attacking civilians, and several children had been killed. Prolonged hunger, the destruction of habitat caused by artillery, and depletion of their natural food sources, the deer and wild boar, had become stronger motivators for the animals to lose their fear of people. At first, the packs of wolves attacked isolated victims, usually feeding upon the dead, but then became emboldened. to attack the wounded soldiers who were bleeding and not highly mobile. One story emerged of a Russian field hospital full of wounded men that was attacked by dozens of wolves. Being behind the lines, these men were not armed, so the carnage was total. But soon, they grew bolder and began to attack groups of soldiers in the field, and the Germans began to experience these events as well. Reports came in from the front commanders to the desk of Colonel General Hermann Emil Gottfried von Eichhorn, commanding the 10th Army headquartered in Tannenberg. Eichhorn was a recipient of the Pour le Mérite with oak leaves, the famous Blue Max, one of the highest orders bestowed for bravery in combat in Imperial Germany.
It's like the Medal of Honor, correct?
Right. Yeah, essentially.
I was seeing a guy trying to sell a fake one on Pawn Stars.
Oh, wow.
But still learned what it was, and thankful for that.
Eichhorn took these reports about the wolves seriously, and he passed them on to the German Imperial High Command in Berlin, the shocking news landing on the desk of Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg. The reports were very explicit, claiming that hundreds of wolves were attacking German soldiers. However, the Imperial Russian High Command was receiving the same information, and both sides initially doubted the accuracy of the reports. General Vladimir Nikolaevich Gorbatovsky, who was the former commander of the Russian 12th Army, and now the commander of the Russian 10th Army, even issued orders for special teams of snipers. These were mostly hunters serving in the Russian army, and they were ordered to hunt the wolves down. The problem was that many of these skilled hunters never returned, and reports were even worse than before. Survivors who made it back claimed that there were hundreds of wolves, not a few dozen, that were roaming the forests and attacking the soldiers. So dire was the situation on the front, and not just because of the large numbers of wolves. Tsar Nicholas II paid a visit to the senior leaders to bolster morale.
All right, I wanted to ask you a personal question because when I was watching this, I've heard the term dire wolf many times.
Right.
He just used the word dire in front of wolf. So can you explain that to me and maybe anyone else wondering that question?
So then guess what he said? Like a dire wolf is like...
We can back up just a few seconds.
Yeah.
Put it in context.
And reports were even worse than before. Survivors who made it back claimed that there were hundreds of wolves, not a few dozen, that were roaming the forests and attacking the soldiers. So dire was the situation on the front, and not just because of the large numbers of wolves.
I know he's not using that in the term of the wolves, but
Right.
Do we know what dire means? If not,
dire basically means urgent.
Okay. So I think dire wolves out of a movie, I know, or something.
Dire
maybe.
wolves, I think it might be a Game of Thrones. It's a fantasy thing. It's common in a lot of fantasy things, like role playing games. You'll fight dire wolves. I think it may have been a large species of wolf that existed previously, but went extinct.
Is that what the wolf's called in the Never-Ending Story?
That I don't remember.
The dire wolf?
I know the scene you're talking about, but I don't remember if it's called a dire wolf or not. So in this case, when he says dire, it just means it's a situation that needs to be fixed, or bad things could happen.
People get
I
neat,
I do want to say that under most circumstances, wolves are not going to attack humans.
Right.
They're predators, but they're not demons. They're not evil. And like I said, for the most part, humans will be safe. If you remember the beginning, they were basically saying that because of the war, because of the bombardment, because of things like that, their wolves' usual prey animals like deer were being either killed or driven out. These wolves were starving. They were desperate. And when an animal is desperate, it will change its normal behaviors. Like I said, survival is a very powerful thing. And what wolves tend to do, a pack of wolves, they will weed out what will be considered the weakest. So they will attack wounded soldiers and, consume them. Like, again, a field hospital full of them. That's essentially a buffet for a group of wolves like that. And then once they're fed, they can become stronger, and then they become a bit bolder, and they'll attack, they'll attack groups of fit soldiers, but they will pick out the ones that trip when they're running, or that can't aim their rifle. Again, that's what wolves do. They pick out, they attack, and then the ones that can't keep up, or the ones that can't run away, or the ones that can't fight them off, they will consume. So at this point in time, basically, sort of the food chain just kind of gets altered a bit because of the war. So I just want to let everyone know, hopefully you all know, wolves are actually really beautiful, intelligent, communal animals. but yeah, like when their environment is altered, they will do what it takes to survive.
Disclaimer, I have seen this. I will speak no more. Let's see how smart OGL is about wolves. All right, back to it.
Tsar Nicholas II paid a visit to the senior leaders to bolster morale, as he had taken over total control of the military. Meanwhile, the Germans, in their trenches, were also feeling the attacks, and reconnaissance patrols were increased in size to include carrying a Spandau machine gun and trained crew as a precaution. Finally, in February of 1917, there was a message from Berlin stating that they understood that large packs of wolves had moved from the forests of Lithuania and Volhynia to the interior of the German Empire, well into East Prussia and even Pomerania. The wolf attacks only increased as the soldiers from both sides tried their best to kill the fearless and hungry animals. There were repeated attempts by the Germans to poison the wolves using strychnine and cyanide, baiting deer and even dead soldiers' corpses. Both sides also tried to kill them with rifles, machine guns, and even grenades. Strafing from aircraft was also conducted. German artillery fired chlorine gas into the forest when the wolves were detected. Both sides even used their reconnaissance aircraft to try and locate the massive wolf packs, which often meant little since radio communications did not yet exist. By the time the pilots returned to file their reports and plot the animals on a map for the ground commanders, the wolves were usually no longer in the same area. The ground commanders in the
I just want to say one thing that struck me when he said that, just realizing the human beings that were out there that really didn't have radio communication then. It was, if you had a problem on the battlefield, you might as well be in some, like where Jeremy Wade fishes, someplace where there isn't a hospital and need a hospital. I mean, it really put how real the first wars were. Not that they're not real now. More complicated. Let's say that. Super complicated for anyone to figure out what's really happening on the field.
Yeah. Wars always suck, but yeah, these first two world wars, World War I in particular, is pretty much known as just a for lack of a better term, a giant pile of human tragedy.
Yeah, I don't even know what it's about, and I've studied it.
Yeah, but yeah, like
I mean, I know the basics, but
I have looked up what started World War I, and it's like literally almost
it's
like
an argument.
Worth of information.
Yeah, it's about as big an argument as you can get.
But you also mentioned, like they mentioned here, that they're using like bombs and bullets and such. And again, think about this: these wolves not used to that kind of noise, not used to that kind of attack. So not only are they hungry, but now you're scaring them, and a scared animal can become very aggressive. So just it's almost like a perfect storm of scenarios to create, a pack of man-eating wolves.
I mean, it was literally, and not to put a cliche on the term, but warfare. I mean, warfare. I just put the wolf in it, but I mean, they were in the war too. So, kind of like the soldiers, undirected and uninformed.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not a whole lot.
Do what they could to survive.
Yeah.
And just looking at film footage or pictures from the first two world wars is always it's heartbreaking. It's compelling in a very tragic way, but yeah, anyone who served in those, my utmost respect and my heart goes out to you guys. Hopefully this will never happen again, but if you study history, we're prone to repeating the same mistakes. So
this is why I'm not wearing a hat. I didn't tell you I was doing this because I knew you wouldn't wear one. All right, let's get back to it.
Used their reconnaissance aircraft to try and locate the massive wolf packs, which often meant little since radio communications did not yet exist. By the time the pilots returned to file their reports and plot the animals on a map for the ground commanders, the wolves were usually no longer in the same area. The ground commanders in the field had to deal with the immediate reality, while their respective superiors in Berlin and St. Petersburg read the reports. their men were being killed. Individual unit commanders decided that something had to be done, and this is where the story really begins. Based on the current situation, the commanders of the German and Russian armies were forced to allow their individual battalion and company commanders to use their discretion and, when necessary, announce a temporary truce and join forces to fight the wolves. It was an agreement among the snipers that, if the Russians and Germans decided to engage in a collective wolf hunt, all firing would cease. In one of the most unusual events in history, Germans and Russians formed platoons, even companies, in mutual hunting parties. Thanks to the coordinated efforts, the soldiers managed to kill several hundred wolves and forced the rest to depart. After the predator problem was solved and the wolves were no longer posing a threat to the troops, fighting resumed and all thoughts of cooperation were forgotten. There has been great skepticism about this story for a century, which was well known among the Germans, and apparently even Russians speak about it. One World War I veteran, a seasoned Eastern Front reconnaissance pilot and 9-victory ace, Hans Bauer, stated, quote, "I heard about the wolves. We all did. This was a problem, especially at our airfield. You could hear howling, but we were never attacked. But we did not have anything resembling great security, as we were farther behind the lines. I understand that the infantry in the area did have these problems." End quote. Regardless of where your opinion may fall on this story, it is worth considering that it was reported, and as Hans Bauer stated, at least the Germans knew about the problem. How deeply involved were the two opposing forces, allied together in addressing the problem, we may never know. What we do know is that sometimes mutual survival is dependent upon mutual cooperation. We hope you enjoyed this segment of Forgotten History. Please click like and subscribe for free. And please stay tuned and be engaged and informed. Send us comments if you have questions or even show ideas, and we will respond to all requests and comments as soon as we can. Thank you.
That's actually a Forgotten History is a good channel. They do a lot of very objective documentaries and have a lot of facts, or yet they don't put it in there at all. I watched a few other documentaries which were maybe a little better than this one, a little more descriptive. Talked a lot about how you were talking about they attacked camps of soldiers. That's why I thought maybe you had predicted this video, but it must have been the other one I watched. But yeah, same thing. They started out with the wounded, then they would start sniping off. I think they mentioned in this video the people who done the surveillance, outside, whatever, the not behind the lines. And then behind the lines, even there wasn't a whole lot of weapons around where there was a lot of injured people, and the wolves would just start attacking. They started getting not so scared of mankind. And
right.
So yeah, we just thought this would be interesting, really.
Yeah, the thing about wolves is, like I said, like any animal, if it'll charge like a group of people, like a herd, for lack of a better term, it will attack the ones that straggle, the ones that are left behind. Wolves, what they will also do is if they're hunting like big, healthy prey, they will attack it. They'll get driven off. Maybe even one of them might get killed or injured, but they'll attack again, and they might get driven off again. But that third and that fourth time, that big, healthy animal is not going to be nearly as fresh, and it's not going to be nearly as strong, and eventually it will succumb to numbers. So you take an animal like a moose or something like that, and how a group of wolves can gradually wear them down. And you just add, healthy human soldiers there instead of the moose. And it's, again, when you change the ecosystem, the animals have to adjust. 9 times out of 10, a wolf won't touch a human. Like I said, they're very beautiful, intelligent animals, but they are predators. And you adjust the ecosystem. You scare them, you starve them, whatever. And then you put a bunch of, excuse the crudeness of this term, but you put a bunch of food items in there. They're going to find a way to get fed.
Life feeds on life, brother. That's as normal as we can. This is normal as everyday life.
Yeah, wolves don't have a history of becoming man-eaters like, for instance, lions or baboons. Believe it or not, baboons actually will become man-eaters as well. But wolves don't have that history. But again, if their ecosystem is turned up on its ear, and we happen to show up, hey, we can't fight them off without weapons. So, and if we're wounded, we're done. But again, it's great to see that the soldiers recognizing that they had to band together. Like if they kept their petty squabbles, all they're basically doing is keeping the wolves fed. So, and again, so you you push the humans, you push the human soldiers. All of a sudden, I realize, okay, hey, whatever these guys are telling us, this isn't going to work. We need to band together. We need to look out for our own asses, and we're going to take care of business. And like, it really sucks. It's always disappointing when you hear something like that, and then afterwards you're like, okay, we're going to start fighting again. It's like, no, look what you've done. You conquered adversity by banding together. But I'm sure they were under all kinds of pressure from the generals and the people in their safe little bunkers miles and miles away, orchestrating the war just to keep fighting. So
yeah,
it's
it'd
nice to
be
see
heresy.
humanity.
You'd be hated by your own people for banding together with people, which is really sad.
Agreed. Yeah. So it was nice to see humanity win that battle, but unfortunately, the war machine won the war machine got its war.
Yeah.
So, but again,
but the war pig still sat at home comfortably.
Yep. War pig still calling.
With the big medals on their chest.
Mm-hmm.
I will speak no more of that matter.
No more.
If you would like to see us do more videos like this, there's one, ironically enough, what you said, this video led me to a video about how pollution is killing the coral reefs, like at an existential rate, like 16% a year, I think, are dying or being what they call bleached out.
Yeah, and if anyone knows about coral reefs, that is a vital part of the marine ecosystem.
Yes, so, it's not just a tourist attraction for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, please let us know, because Danny and I are both really into stuff like this.
We love stuff like this.
We watch it all the time, and I'm definitely going to be hitting up this channel to see some more stuff. But yeah, let us know, because I love doing this reaction. I love seeing this. I love hearing stories like this. So, thank you guys so much for joining us. Hopefully you learned something. Check out Forgotten History. It's a great channel. And check us out again, because we'll be back very soon.
Mental health is real. So is war. They're both very hard to describe. So just love each other. Unity is the key to fix all of that. Or change it.
Either
maybe
for
it's a better word.
But most definitely support your veterans. They get
a
very bad shaft from a lot of things nowadays. So just every now and then, just telling them, hey, thank you for your service. I work at a McDonald's. We don't do military discounts. If someone tells me they're a veteran, I give them a discount. That's the least I can do. So
I always looked at that finger, Uncle Sam pointing at, I want you. Well, do you want me when you're done with me?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, peace. Love you all. Be good to each other. Just love in general. Your lighting's better than mine. Way better. We're always
natural. Bit yellowed,
brighter than me.
But yeah. Usually it's like too bad. I got like the fucking moon on my head or some shit. So looks like it works pretty good.
Well, I don't got much hair, man, so I'll pretend. We're rolling, by the way.
All right, sweet.
OGL probably knows, but who is OGL?
I don't actually. I don't.
It's like a broadcaster, American broadcaster. But
okay.
So thank you for your service, whoever you may be, even if you're just serving cheeseburgers like Greg. Thank you for my damn cheeseburger.
If you eat one of those cheeseburgers, you might not be so thankful, brother.
I have, so I kept turning the light off.